Hey everyone, welcome back to Higurashi When They Cry, Chapter 1, Onikakushi. Things are getting a little creepy for Keiichi. Uh, it seems like Rena and Mion are very suspicious, to say the least, to the point where they gave him a dessert with a needle inside of it, which is morbid. So we will see what could possibly happen from here. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of muffled footsteps stopped in front of the door to my room. A moment of silence, as if whomever they belonged to was ascertaining if I was inside. Of all the things I should have been doing, I continued on with my restless slumber. I was very much conscious, but my body hadn't caught up yet. Even with danger bearing down on me from just beyond the door, it was as if I was completely paralyzed, unable to move. Without a doubt, this was sheer terror. Please, just leave. Hey, why isn't my body awake yet? If they came into my room right now, then... Oh. I sprung to my feet and threw my covers at my mom, who was just opening the door.
Nani, Keiichi? どうしたの?
ごめん、寝ぼけてた。
I thought it was still 1 or 2 a.m., but the morning sun was already streaming through the gap between the curtains. It felt nothing like morning. Yesterday, I must have fallen asleep right after that. Then I should have gotten a full 10 hours of rest. But it didn't feel like that at all. My internal clock was completely screwed up and my sense of balance felt off. I felt feverish enough that it was clear to me that I was still not well.
どう、Keiichi? 体の調子はどう? 学校行けそう?
I felt far from well. No, I wasn't mentally fit to go. I was still plagued with the terror from yesterday. If I had swallowed that needle, what would have happened? Or what if it had pierced my tongue? There was undoubtedly a murderous intent, but I don't think that's all it was. If they really wanted to kill me, then there were other, more certain ways to do it. They wouldn't resort to such a dubious method as having me swallow a needle. Meaning, I didn't want to believe it, but going that far was just a threat from Rena and Mion. Aren't you glad you didn't die? But next time, we'll use a more assured method. Like that. Something like sending a letter with a razor inside would have been a joke compared to this.
ちゃんと病院は行った? お薬は飲んだの?
まあ一応。
Something about my mom's dubious gaze bothered me. She seemed more concerned about her son missing 2 days of school rather than him being sick. It was definitely mental fatigue. I wasn't really physically ill.
一度生活のリズムを崩すとなかなか戻らないんだから。さあ、起きて起きて。病は気からって言うのよ。
I'd heard that line many times before. I was given an award in elementary school for having perfect attendance, but it wasn't like I was healthier than everyone.
さあさあ、顔洗ってらっしゃい。ご飯はもうできてるわよ。もうレナちゃんが来るまであまり時間がないわよ。
Mom's tone meant I couldn't argue about it, so I had to give up on skipping a second day.
そうそう。今の壁にボタ餅を投げつけたのはケイチ？ダメよ、あんなことしちゃ。お父さん怒ってたわよ。
I didn't feel particularly guilty about doing it, so I didn't have much of a reaction. Also, Mom didn't question me any further about it. She headed back downstairs after she was certain I was getting up. What Mion said as she left yesterday, "I hate it if you miss school tomorrow," came back and dwelled in the back of my head. What did she mean by that? I didn't even have to really think about it. She was saying, don't be absent. Taking that a bit further, it was the same as her saying I should just go about living my life as if nothing happened. If I showed any signs of acting unusual, it would probably result in them making their move. If I acted differently, someone like Oishi-san, for example, might end up noticing that something is up. Meaning, if I didn't watch my mouth or did anything differently from the norm, in effect, it would end up communicating something to those who were undesirable. And it seems that was something that the girls didn't intend to forgive. So, if I just went along as normal, no harm would come to me. Was that how it was going to be? All that misery I experienced up until yesterday would, almost creepily, just fade away. It was an enticing deal. Just by forgetting everything I'd seen or heard these last few days, I'd be able to keep living on like normal.
そんな虫のいい話あるわけ？
I swallowed hard. I once again deliberated on the idea that I had just rejected. Mion was probably a good person who had her friends at heart. She was giving me, who had mistakenly broke some rule of theirs, a chance. Was what I did really something so unforgivable? But Mion had given me another chance. She was saying, if I just forgot everything and kept living on like I had been, I'd be forgiven.
ケイチ、ご飯冷めちゃうわよ。急いで降りてらっしゃい。早くしないとレナちゃんが来ちゃうわよ。
あ、今行くよ。
I crammed my textbooks into my bag and hastily made my way downstairs. I picked at my somewhat bland breakfast. It seemed that I didn't have much time. It was already past when I usually met up with Rena. Given yesterday's events, she'd probably be here in the next 5 minutes. I needed to be ready to head to school by then. I had to forget everything that had happened the past 2 days. Forget it all and return to my normal life. For this to be normal, I'll have to be where I normally meet up with Rena. Today of all days, the rice was dry and hard to get down. Ding dong. I jumped at the sound and dropped my chopsticks. That chime signaled That chime had signaled that Rena had arrived. Mom hurried me along.
ほらレナちゃん来ちゃったわよ。急いで急いで。
My mother's merry smile and my gloomy face were polar opposites. Honestly, I was reluctant to see Rena, who was waiting there on the other side of the door. The Rena on the other side of the door, was it the Rena I knew? I couldn't keep her waiting. I needed to do things as usual.
おはよ
An invigorating greeting filtered in from across the doorway.
う。ケイチ君、遅かったから来てみたけど、今日はどうかな？かな？
The manner in which Rena was concerned was, without a doubt, the Rena I knew. But that was probably only if I reciprocated. Forget everything from yesterday. Pretend as though nothing had happened. Forget about the gruesome dismemberment. Forget about the mysterious deaths that happened the following years. Forget about the people falling to their deaths, and the terminal illness and suicide, the fatal beatings, and the disappearances. Forget it. Forget all of it. Forget that Rena and Mion were scary. Of course, forget it all. Forget about all of it. Forget about the mochi, too. Forget. Rena once again asked to make sure.
学校行けそう？
あ大丈夫だよ。
よかった。じゃあ行こう。みーちゃん待ってるよ。
Rena showed me her usual bright smile. I couldn't find any hint of deceit in her expression. My nervousness dissipated, giving way to relief.
なのにさとこちゃんね、絶対にできるって意地になっちゃって。
As we were walking, Rena talked about a lot of different stuff, more so than usual.
それで
さとこちゃん不吉祥だから何度やってもできないの。はう、かいかったんだよ。
Everything Rena talked about was just silly nonsense, so I just replied every so often and laughed from time to time. It was a rather laid-back conversation. We passed by one of our neighbors, and they called out to us.
あれ？ケイチちゃんにレナちゃん。今日はちょっと遅いんじゃないの？ミオンちゃん、先に行くって言ってたわよ。
あ、みーちゃん怒ってるかな？怒ってるかな？早く行こう、ケイチ君。
After greeting our neighbor with a smile, Rena turned back to me and poked her tongue out. Not expecting that, I couldn't help but crack a smile.
ケイチ君笑った。
なんだよ。
Rena stopped and stared at me.
ケイチ君、今朝もなんか元気なかったから、まだ風邪が治らないのかなって思ってたけど、大丈夫みたいだね。だね。
With a grin, she gently poked at my cheek. It was a bright, sincere smile. Hey, Keiichi Mayabara. How can you still doubt Rena after she shows you a smile like that? Maybe I just had a high fever up until today, and I imagined everything that I thought happened because I was bedridden and delirious. I really hope that was the case. If God would grant me just one wish, there's only one thing that I'd wish for. I would want what had happened in the past few days. More specifically, from the night of the Watanagashi up until last night, I wanted all of that to have never happened. I wondered how many times I'd wished for these past few days. As long as Rena kept on smiling like this, I think it might just become reality. So I wanted Rena to keep on smiling. Keep on smiling.
で、ケイチくん、昨日のおはぎちゃんと食べてくれた？
Oh. Uh-oh. That vain wish of mine was instantly shattered. My heart began palpitating. The relaxed morning mood suddenly became frigid. Rena's smile was the same as usual. Her eyes were gentle as usual. Those mochi yesterday, did you eat them all? Of course she wasn't asking the question at face value. In other words, Rena was asking, did you get the message? She was probably trying to convey that.
ケイチくん、
I was reluctant to give an answer. Rena stopped walking and stared deeply into my eyes. Don't hesitate, Keiichi Mayabara. Rena was acting the same as always, wasn't she? I needed to respond in my usual way. Naturally, of course. But both my throat and mouth had gone dry, and my lips were stuck together. Hurry and answer, Keiichi. Not that much time had passed. I could still keep the conversation going naturally. I had to say something quickly. I've had a very similar experience. Not so much in a terrifying way like this, but like I'm talking to someone and my brain is starting to run out of things to talk about, and I'm just thinking, come on, I gotta come up with something, keep the conversation going naturally, don't hesitate, don't stutter, and I just feel that. Rena playfully mimicked what I said when I finally squeaked something out. Rena's reaction was still normal. It seems that there wasn't as long of a pause as I had thought. Somehow, I finally squeaked out the rest. However, my strained efforts neither sullied nor brightened Rena's expression. For a moment I panicked, thinking I had replied incorrectly. But after a few moments, Rena broke into her usual soft smile and giggled with the joyful voice that seemed to echo through the morning air. Being strung along by that laugh, I couldn't help but laugh as well.
そうなんだ。で、全部食べたのかな？かな？
My timid smile froze again. Did you make it without swallowing the sewing needle? Was that what she was asking? If I had swallowed it, then I wouldn't be here.
いや、全部は食べきれなかったからさ。まだ残ってるんだよ。
I was scared out of my wits, but that's how I played it.
あれれ？どれがレナが作ったのか当てる宿題はどうなっちゃったのかな？
あの宿題って今日までだったっけ？
うん、 でなんだよ。みーちゃん怒るよ。きっと罰ゲームだね。
We both laughed at each other again. To a casual observer, it was just a typical morning. If I could just let myself believe, then even I think it was just a usual morning routine. But I was certain I wasn't mistaken. There was something unimaginable buried beneath the facade of this giggling Rena. Okay, that was just a memory. I was thinking she screamed that again. I recalled that unexpected piercing voice that I could hardly believe came from Rena's mouth. The moment that image crossed my mind, I felt a cold sweat trickle down my back. Was it only at that particular time that something evil had possessed Rena? No, that was wrong. That was still Rena. Oishi-san told me, didn't he?
実は調べてみたら、竜宮さんは引っ越しの少し前に学校で謹慎処分を受けているんですよ。なんでも学校中のガラスを割って回ったんだとか。
Rena had a disorder that normal people didn't. No matter how pleasantly she smiled, that fact would not change. But I couldn't even imagine how she looked as she broke all of the glass throughout the school. One thing I knew was that it wasn't something spur of the moment. If it was some sudden outburst of anger, then maybe she'd break a pane or two. But she broke all of the windows all throughout her school. Just imagine going through your old school, breaking the windows with a bat. Swinging full force at each pane of glass, one after another, paying no heed to the flying shards. Your classmates aghast, unable to move from the sudden turn of events. I wonder where she could have found the most windows lined up in a row. Probably the hallway. Smash, walk, wind up, smash, walk, wind up. It was difficult for me to connect that horrifying image with the Rena smiling at me right now. But I just had to imagine it. Impossible because it was unimaginable. The naive way of thinking no longer worked. The unpleasant, piercing sound of shattered glass, the crunching noise as Rena treads across the broken shards, walking towards me. Rena's classmates, going pale as they forget to even breathe. I wondered what they did as Rena came closer, breaking windows along her path. Did they earnestly try to bring her to her senses by saying something? Or did they jump at her, trying to stop her savagery? Or did they run into the staff room and call for the teachers? Probably none of those. In the face of the blood-curdling sight of Rena busting through window after window, undoubtedly, all they could do was silently clear a path for her. Dumbfounded, just clearing the path for Rena to continue. It would be cruel to blame anyone for looking the other way. No, they weren't simply looking the other way. They knew it was the only way that they could protect themselves. If they had done something differently from the rest, they may have suddenly found themselves as Rena's new target. What would Rena have done to whoever attracted her attention? The answer was obvious. She would have undoubtedly acted according to her whims. Meaning I would, be the next window. Rena, staring into my eyes, shards of glass crunching and crackling underfoot as she drew closer. I was also drawn into her eyes, paralyzed. Then Rena struck me with the bat over and over again, like I was one of those windows. I crouched down on the floor, desperately protecting my head. Rena didn't care whether it was my head or my back. Zealously, she hits me again and again. What kind of expression was she making as she was doing this over and over again? I peered up to see. Her expression was so indifferent, it was completely unnerving. It's because no matter how many times she struck me, I didn't make as pleasant a sound as the other windows. She struck me continuously, over and over again. So is he just imagining this whole scenario as he's walking with her to school? The sound Rena wanted didn't come out. Our classmates standing around didn't try to stop her. They didn't want to be the next window. Somebody save me. Turning a blind eye unless we're hanging out. But of course, everyone in class scrambled to obtain the highest standardized test scores. They'd gain nothing from saving a cramped school tryhard like me. Eventually, there would be a faint sound, similar to when you crack open a walnut, and some sort of reddish-black spray would shoot out. Anyway, it wasn't that Rena momentarily lost herself in her anger. After forcing myself to breathe and calming down my heart, I recalled what Oishi-san told me.
でですね、そのカウンセリングをした医師のカルテにレナさんの会話内容が記載されているんですがね、その中に出てくるんですよ。結構。
何がです？
出てくるんですよ。お社様って単語が。
Following that, Rena was suspended and had regular examinations at the hospital. Then, as Rena was undergoing counseling, she said it over and over. Oyashiro-sama.
お社様っていう幽霊みたいなものがですね、夜な夜な自宅にやってくるっていうんですよ。枕元に立って自分を見下ろすんだって。
That was only a piece of their conversation, so I still couldn't see the big picture. But it was by no means a happy little conversation. Then what Rena did? Was she saying that ghastly incident was the result of her being possessed by Oyashiro-sama? Up until now, I didn't want to believe in Oyashiro-sama's curse. That's why I wanted to say the mysterious deaths every year happen because of some sort of conspiracy. Every time I talked with Oishi-san, I was more certain that the deaths were the work of men and not some curse. Except, if it was people perpetrating the incidents, my friends were somehow deeply connected. If I refused to believe that the curse was real, then I would have to believe those who acted the kindest to me were deeply involved in the incidents. Why? How? For what reason? Was Rena? Was everybody? It was much more painful and troublesome than accepting that it was just Oyashiro-sama's curse. In the aftermath, Rena had admitted to her doctor that it was because she was possessed by Oyashiro-sama. I felt a strange sense of relief from that. So that's how it was. There wasn't a second side to Rena. She did that because she was possessed by something strange like Oyashiro-sama. It wasn't Rena's fault. Oyashiro-sama was the one to blame. I knew this was all backwards. Refusing to believe there was a curse, I wanted there to be a human perpetrator. Now that my close friends were the ones under suspicion, I changed my beliefs at my own convenience, saying it was Oyashiro-sama's curse to blame. Which was the better choice, accepting that Oyashiro-sama's curse exists? Or that Rena and the rest of them were deeply involved in the string of mysterious deaths? I didn't want to think about it. If I just didn't think about it, I'd be able to continue the same as always. I wanted to believe that. But that was no longer possible. I'd received their message. It was pathetic of me to try and bend the meaning to my own convenience. Regardless of whether my opponent were human or a curse, I won't let it kill me. As if I would just bend over and give in. For no good reason at all.
圭一君、さっきから変な顔してる。なんでだろう。
Oh, it's nothing, just disassociating. Do it all the time. Inhaling sharply upon hearing Rena's voice, I came back to my senses. Before I'd realized it, we were already at the entrance. Shaking my head a few times, I exorcised all of those terrifying thoughts. No matter how you looked at it, there's no way Rena could have done such terrible things. It was like I was trying to placate myself. As I slid the door open, a blackboard eraser loaded with chalk dropped down on my head the moment I stepped into the classroom. The chalk dust went into my eyes, inducing a brief moment of agony.
ずる休みの圭一さんにはお似合いですことよ。圭一もレナもおはようございますです。おはよう、さとこちゃんにリカちゃん。
Not quite in the mood for it, I didn't really react to Sadako's trap. Sadako braced herself as I passed by, expecting me to attack her. She seemed a bit disappointed that I simply walked by silently.
何なんですの？張り合いがありませんわ。圭一、まだ本調子じゃないみたいです。うん。だから今日は加減してあげてね。
Suddenly there was a slap down on my shoulder. It hurt a bit.
よっ、ケイちゃん、しっか
かり休んできた？
It was Mion. My mind was full of stuff about Rena, but Mion was also a party of interest. Remember Keiichi? That hawkish gaze from yesterday?
ああ、おはよ
なんだなんだ、随分と覇気のない挨拶じゃん。差し入れのおはぎちゃんと食べてくれなかったの？
I'm like this because I ate them. Those words were itching to be blurted out.
う。やっぱ食欲がなくてさ。いくつかは食べたけど、だいぶ残しちゃったんだ。
Whoops.
あれ、じゃあ宿題は？どれがレナの手作りかってのの回答は？ケイチくん宿題忘れなんだって。ありゃあ、じゃあ仕方ないね。罰ゲーム。ヒヒヒヒヒ。
Flashing a lurid smile, Mion returned to her seat. There was nothing from our exchanges that would cause our classmates to suspect anything was amiss. But of course, anyone listening to our conversation up until this morning wouldn't see anything suspicious. That was why it was so frightening. They acted in a way that, regardless of whatever happened to Keiichi Mayabara, no one would ever suspect them. That fact had me terrified. Soon the teacher came. After she asked how I felt and took attendance, another dull, ordinary day began. This free study period was a convenient time to consider where I stood. I gently closed my eyes and pondered the ridiculous position I was in right now. First of all, what I shouldn't forget was how dangerous of a situation I was in. I had fallen out of favor with them. After interacting with Oishi-san multiple times, I could see it as I was getting closer to the heart of the matter. The warning yesterday with the mochi was a good indicator of that. No, calling it a warning was just my habit of understanding things. It probably had no meaning beyond stunting my progress and buying themselves some time. Until they had a method to completely erasing me, they were just biding their time. Even though they were keeping me under their thumb with threats, it didn't change the fact that I knew too much. The chilling sensation at my desk made me recall Satoshi Hojo, the boy who was using the seat until last year when he disappeared. Was he also similar to me? Did he learn something he shouldn't have and was erased? Damn. I wouldn't let them get rid of me so easily. Never. But were they really trying to kill me? I've had these contradictory feelings for a while now. Even though I suspected them, I felt I had to cover for them. Even having witnessed all of their suspicious behavior, a morning just like this made it all seem like an elaborate hoax. No, that's just what I want to believe. Doubting my friends? Covering for them? My life was in danger. Or was it? Actually, I was debating the wrong point. Given my current situation, those points were something that should have been deliberated on long time ago. But really, Ren and the rest of them, were they actually aiming to kill me? The little voice inside me continued to torment me with these unsolvable trains of thought. Are you an idiot, Keiichi Mayabara? The answer should be obvious. But maybe that sewing needle might have just been an accident, right? How could you screw up and drop a sewing needle into a piece of mochi? That's, the benefit of the doubt can only go so far. Both Rena and Mion had acted and behaved suspiciously, but maybe it was all some sort of misunderstanding. What kind of misunderstanding? It wasn't just suspicion. It was outright ludicrous, right? Rena just corrected me for lying, and Mion only asked me about what I had for lunch. Rena was standing outside my door eavesdropping for a solid hour. She was probably just waiting for my phone call to end. For a whole hour outside your room? And is it normal to go home afterwards without saying anything? Huh. You heard from Oishi-san, didn't you? About what Rena did at her former school? But at the hospital, she said it was Oyashiro-sama's fault.
いい加減にしろよ、前原圭一。お前、命を狙われてるって自覚あるのかよ。
I inadvertently blurted those words out loud. Hearing myself say that so directly left me dumbfounded for a few moments. Afterwards, I had to look around and check if anyone had heard it. My little soliloquy cut a little too close to the truth. Even though I could feel the murderous intent from Rena and the others, part of me somewhere was still trying to deny that. This late in the game, such hesitation could be fatal. I knew that. But I was just your average student, a man living his normal, ordinary life. Do you think I could suddenly believe that my friends, who had been happily laughing together with up until last Sunday, now intended to kill me? Right?
甘えるな、圭一。
Maybe stop yelling at yourself out loud? This time I remembered to keep my voice down so only I could hear it. There was one thing I now understood. I was too soft. I didn't completely understand how dangerous Rena and the rest of them were. No, I wasn't trying to understand. I was too soft for not listening to Oishi-san when he was earnestly showing me the heart of the matter. I didn't listen because I was too busy pretending to be dejected. I didn't comprehend it. I was just running away. I didn't comprehend it, so nobody had any notion to try and kill me. I needed to get rid of such naive thoughts. As I made that resolution, I heard the bell signaling the end of class. So soon? The day was already over. I didn't recall eating lunch or doing anything in class. My friends were putting their desks together in preparation for club activities. Not long ago, I would probably have happily jumped into that circle.
あらあらケイチさん、 帰り支度とはあんまりですことよ。
The way Sadako spoke was so typical and familiar, it almost physically hurt.
あれ、ケイチ君、今日は都合悪いのかな。今日こそ2人で大勝利。
Seeing Rena's expression, which said she was really looking forward to today, was hard to take. Hey Keiichi, maybe Oishi-san is just some enormous jerk trying to separate me from the others by lying to me. Slap. Trying to expunge such weak-minded thinking, I slapped myself in the face.
ケイチ君、
Yeah, was Rena really trying to kill me? I wish someone would tell me it was a hoax. I didn't care if it actually was one or not, I just wanted someone to say it was. Gah, yet another weak-willed thought. How did I ever become this naive?
大丈夫？頭痛いの？
Apparently that was how my inner dilemma appeared to Rena.
顔色悪いよ。一人で帰れる？送ってった方がいいかな。
いや、いい。ごめん。一人で帰れる。部活はみんなでやってくれよ。
Upon hearing that I wasn't going to participate in the club meeting, Mion pouted unhappily.
ケイちゃんがリベンジ熱望してたってんで、今日はせっかくこの間の推理ゲームにしたってのにな。
ケイチさんにはリターンマッチに臨む熱いハートはありませんですの？情けないですわね。
I wouldn't fall for some dumb taunt. Without even a real retort, I just grabbed my bag and was about to get up. Someone's hand perched itself gently on my head.
ケイチ、具合悪そうです。かわいそうですよ。
It was Rika-chan. She was stretched up as far as she could, doing her best to pat my head with her petite hand. It felt so nice, which made things even harder.
ごめんな。みんな。じゃ。
That's all I said as I quickly left the classroom. They said something to me as I was leaving, but I couldn't make it out. I managed to make it all the way to the entrance. In that state of mind, took out my shoes, put them on, and went forward. Harden that heart, Keiichi Mayabara. They were, for some unfathomable reason, trying to kill me. They were plotting something dubious, watching my every move. But I couldn't hate them. Because weren't they my friends? Part of me lamented my naivety, while another part lamented the fact that I had lost something important by lamenting over it in the first place. It felt like my personality was being ripped in two, along with my body. If this is what Oyashiro-sama's curse was like, then it was just too harsh. Hey, Oyashiro-sama, I was wrong for not believing in your curse. but I believed in it now. Completely. Your curse does exist. So seriously, give me a break. I beg you, come on. Dinner was unusually bland. It had no flavor or aroma. The miso soup that normally tantalized my appetite instead tasted like nothing but boiled water. Dad was eating with us that night. It was a rare occurrence in this household. When he got into his work, he ate and slept on his own schedule. My dad never cared about the time. Since my dad was at the dinner table, it either meant he had just reached a good point to take a break or he was in a slump.
とにかく作家のモチベーションってものを理解してないんだよ彼は。
タイアップの話だって口約束なんでしょ。そんなに反りが合わないならきっぱりお断りしたら。
助け合いの世界だからお互い様だとは思うんだけど、これじゃ仕事にな。
I wasn't able to pick out much of my mom and dad's conversation, but I could tell it wasn't a very pleasant topic. That, of course, made the disgusting food even less appealing. Staring lifelessly at the exchange between my parents, my mind wandered off to the same thought process I had going all day long. Friends close to me. No, they used to be friends, but I could no longer trust them. Right now, I was greatly lacking in allies. People I trusted. People I could depend on when push came to shove. They were something I just didn't have. Having just one ally would have been incredibly reassuring in the currently hopeless situation I was in. I put down my chopsticks and looked over at my parents, who were still talking about work. The first course of action that came to mind was to tell my parents everything. Currently, there wasn't a single person from Hinamizawa I could trust 100%. That meant the only people I could trust were my parents. But if I told them everything that happened up until now, would they understand? Rena, for example. That neighborly Rena, who was so diligent in looking after me, came to get me every day, and sometimes brought over a share of what she made. How could I explain that she wanted to kill me? No matter how I explained it, it would probably be difficult for anybody to comprehend. My somewhat eccentric dad wouldn't understand, and my high-strung mom would probably drag me off to a psychiatrist in the blink of an eye. Sadly, that was the amount of trust that existed in our relationship. Even if they did come to understand, what could they possibly do? Unless they could uncover the truth, they wouldn't be able to protect me. No, by informing them of these unnecessary things, I'd be putting my parents in danger as well. Considering that the victims in the past incidents were obviously married couples, I couldn't even joke about it. For the entire Mayabara family to have an accident or just vanish into thin air, it was easily possible in Hinamizawa. What was important here was that knowing something unnecessary put you in danger. The most unsettling question was, how did they know that I knew? As long as they didn't know, my parents might not fall victim. as that was one way to think about it, I guess. At least it was like that in my case. After I found out, things started becoming odd. In other words, I meant the following. As long as my parents didn't know anything, nothing would happen to them. Which means that this house would be a safe haven as long as my parents were in. I knew these were just assumptions based on conjecture on top of conjecture. Wanting this house to be a safe haven, that was the pinnacle of my weak-willed method of thinking. I had to concede that it was not completely safe. It was only safer than outside. I knew that I couldn't rely on my parents. No, I couldn't risk getting my parents involved. Then the only person who could be my ally would be Oishi-san, him and him alone. He was the only person who understood the situation I was in. He didn't care so much about my safety, but he was without a doubt passionate about solving this case. It was a bit frustrating. Oishi-san was basically the whole reason I was in this mess. Now to get out of it, I had to rely on him. Meaning, it was all going according to his devices. It was just my job to look appetizing while bobbing in the waves as bait. Then, when the fish started gathering around, Oishi-san would pull up the big haul. It was slightly infuriating, but even I thought that was the best course of action. So then, what should I do? Patience was the first rule of fishing. Just keep waiting until fish actually bites. But I wasn't simply bait. There were lots of ways for me to struggle before being devoured. When they struck, I needed to somehow dodge just enough to tag out to Oishi-san. No question, it was going to be hard. The timing to bring Oishi-san in would be difficult. He was in the city, not Hinamizawa. If I phoned him in my moment of need, it would take him about 30 minutes to reach me. So I needed to run away for those 30 minutes. For example, if we set up a rendezvous point for dire situations or something, I just have to hide out there until Oishi-san arrived.
よし、少し見えてきたぞ。
I was still being chased around in the dark by boogeymen, but now I knew which way to go. I would never have imagined this would be so reassuring. Oh yeah. It would probably be best if I had a concealed weapon for when things got rough. Typically, that would call for a switchblade. But that wasn't too reassuring for combat. Also, since it was recognized as a weapon by the public, it also wasn't good. Really, when the time comes, a long weapon like a bat would work in my favor. I remember there was a metal bat at school. I could be confident with that when push came to shove. If I pretended I was practicing my swing, then it wouldn't be suspicious for me to always carry it around. I could go to school early tomorrow and secure it. Just possessing a weapon may be enough to deter them. Also, one more thing. Insurance. It could be something like a note or memo. I could write down everything that's happened as a sort of journal. In case I suddenly vanish, the journal would be left behind. With my journal in his possession, Oishi-san should be able to avenge my death. I left my parents engrossed in their conversation about work and went back to my room. I tore a piece of paper from a notebook and made my way to my desk. Last time I wrote a journal was for summer homework in elementary school. In the off chance something bad happened, the police could use my diary as a lead. So I should only write down the facts. How should I start? I jotted down my thoughts as they came. I, Keiichi Mayabara, am in fear of my life. It made me laugh nervously. It was a line that showed up often in detective stories. I never even dreamed that I would be in the type of situation where I'd write it myself. I do not know why they are after my life. Rena and the others were suspicious, but I have no proof. And that's why I couldn't write anything more. I laughed wryly at myself for writing such a passage draped in mystery. Would the police be able to get a hint from reading this enigmatic message? I could only pray that they would. What I prayed for the most, though, was that this journal never needed to play its part. Here, I laughed nervously. It was too simple, so I wrote down one more line I just thought of. The only thing I do know is that it has something to do with Oyashiro-sama's curse. Was that too much? I probably shouldn't write down more than that. If I wrote any more, then it would seem like I was just delusional. In order to appear to the reader that the person who had written this was of sound mind, I chose not to write anything else at that point. I just needed to add more as I learned more about the truth. I folded the paper and thought about a place to hide it. By hiding it somewhere obvious, there would be a chance that they would uncover it instead. On the other hand, if it was too obscure of a location, then there was a risk of nobody finding it at all. In the end, I decided to take the clock off my wall and stick the folded note on the back of it with Scotch tape. After that, I put my clock back into its normal position. Yeah. It didn't look like anything was hidden behind it. Now I needed to set it up that if anything happens to me, my parents could find it. I looked at it from countless different angles until I was satisfied and made my way downstairs. My parents were still talking about work. It didn't look like it was going to end anytime soon, so I cut in.
話中ごめん。ちょっと聞いてもらっていいかな。
I'd never started off a conversation like that before, so my parents were both startled. They stopped talking and turned towards me.
どうしたのケイイチ？
お願いがあるんだけど、聞いてほしいんだ。もしもだよ。
ケイイチ、急ぎの話じゃなきゃ後にしなさい。お父さんとお母さんはちょっと今急ぎの話をしてるんだ。
I didn't think their talk was more urgent than mine. In any case, I started my request.
もしもだよ。俺が死んだらさ。
Both of my parents' eyes went as wide as saucers.
死んだらさ。俺の部屋にある時計、あれを棺に入れてほしいんだ。
If they did that, then they'd probably find it. My memoir. Both my parents remained wide-eyed, not moving an inch. I couldn't blame them.
あの時計工作の授業で作ったお気に入りなんだ。頼むよ。
どうしたのケイチ、何かあったの？
Mom was finally able to ask me with a questioning gaze. Of course, this was a normal response for when someone's son suddenly talked about a subject like this. I felt bad about making them worry, but right now I just wanted them to think about the clock in my room. With the awkward mood leaving the room in silence, I decided to go back up to my room.
俺さ、明日は早くに学校に行きたいから、もう寝るよ。おやすみ。
Saying only that, I left the living room. I needed to get to school early tomorrow to secure that bat. I should make today the last day I went to school with Rena. As I climbed the stairs, I heard my mom call my name, but I pretended not to hear it. It wasn't something I could talk about with my parents. If I talked about it, it would only make things more dangerous. The fight that had begun was mine and mine alone. I couldn't rely on anybody. I wouldn't be killed. Not when I still knew nothing. Man, this is a lot of reading. Which I do feel like I'm getting slowly better at reading for long periods of time, with only the occasional stumble here and there. But my voice is starting to ache up. My throat, I mean. Not feeling so hot.
最近圭一くんの元気がないね。機嫌が悪いのかな。
さーてどうしたんだろうね。恋の病にでもかかってるんじゃないの？
みーちゃん、それ飛躍しすぎ。
I love the way her laugh is written. A yak 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 yak.
どう思う？
さあね。ケイちゃんひょっとして。
わかんない。
あの日ケイちゃんと車で話してたの中年のでっぷりした男だったんでしょ？
うん、間違いない。
大石のやつケイちゃんに何を吹き込んでるのかな。
So she does know it's Soishi.
真剣そうだったよ。圭一くんは顔面蒼白だった。
あのね、レナはよく知らないだろうけど、実はあいつお社様の使いなんだよ。
Messenger.
何の話？
あいつが現れるとね、必ず鬼隠しが起こるの。本当だよ。
あれ？そうなの？
一昨年リカちゃんのお母さんが受水したでしょ。その直前に大石が尋問してたんだよ。
そういえばサトシくんが転校する前にもいたね。
転校？レナはいいやつだよな。
で 今度はケイイチくんの前に現れたんだ。じゃあケイイチくんも鬼隠しになっちゃう？
An empty silence hung in the air. And then it was suddenly interrupted. By loud laughter. Alright, that is very ominous. Wow. Okay, so another episode down. Keiichi is finding himself in a corner, it seems. He's planning very carefully about what all could possibly go wrong, and I gotta say I can relate to that. Like in any situation, even a mild inconvenience, I'm like, okay, who do I have to beat up? Who do I have to hide from? Who do I have to run from, lie to, etc.? I was especially like that in school, so I get the feeling, like overthinking everything and trying to work it out yourself. But it was never quite to this severe extent. So, what will happen to Keiichi? And we will find out later on. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next episode. Later!